Rania had always been known as a strong and quiet girl. She moved through life with calmness, never showing her struggles openly. People admired her confidence and softness, believing she had everything under control. But behind her calm smile, she had been fighting a silent battle for several weeks. Something inside her body felt wrong. At first, it was just small discomfort, little aches, tiredness, and moments when her breath felt heavy. She ignored it, thinking it was due to stress or long work hours. She believed that resting a bit more or drinking warm tea would make everything better. But it didn't. As the days passed, her pain grew stronger and more constant. The tiredness turned into a heaviness that stayed with her all day. She felt dizzy sometimes, and even walking a few steps made her heart race. Still, she hid it. Rania had always been afraid of worrying others, especially her family and friends. She didn't want anyone to think she was weak. She preferred suffering silently, rather than asking for help. Among all her friends, Amir was the one who understood her the most. He noticed small details about people, especially about her. He saw how her energy had slowly faded over the weeks. He saw how her smile lacked its usual warmth. Whenever he asked if she was fine, she would give the same answer. "I'm okay, just a little tired." But Amir knew it was more than that. Something was changing, and not in a good way. One evening, things took a serious turn. Rania came home after a long day, feeling more exhausted than ever before. The pain in her body felt sharp and deep, as if her strength was draining every minute. She tried to drink some water, but her hands shook so much that she dropped the glass. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Her vision blurred for a moment, and she felt a wave of fear. She didn't want to collapse, yet she couldn't stand straight either. She slowly sat on the edge of her bed, trying to calm her breath. The world felt heavy, as if it was pressing down on her. She closed her eyes, hoping rest might help even a little, but instead of resting, her body trembled, and she felt a strange coldness spreading. She tried calling out, but her voice was too weak. At that moment, her phone buzzed. It was Amir. He had a habit of checking on her whenever he felt something was wrong. He asked if she had eaten dinner and how her day had been. She didn't answer at first, mostly because she couldn't. After a minute, she gathered the little strength she had and replied with a short message, "Not feeling well." Amir felt a sudden worry. He called her immediately. When she picked up, her voice sounded thin, weak, and tired, unlike anything he had ever heard from her. He asked if she was alone, and she whispered a soft, "Yes." He didn't waste a second. "I'm coming," he said. Rania didn't argue, because she didn't have the strength anymore. 20 minutes later, Amir reached her place. When Rania opened the door for him, he froze for a moment. She looked pale, almost colorless, and her breathing was uneven. Her hands trembled lightly, and it was clear that standing was difficult for her. Amir felt a tightness in his chest. Seeing her like this was terrifying. He stepped closer and gently held her arm, helping her walk inside. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked softly, trying to keep his worry quiet. Rania gave a faint smile, trying to appear normal, but her eyes showed exhaustion too deep to hide. "I thought it would go away," she whispered. Amir guided her to sit down and asked where it hurt. She placed a hand on her stomach and chest, but she couldn't explain everything in detail. Her whole body felt as if it was shutting down slowly. She closed her eyes again, tears forming from the pressure inside her. Not from fear, but from pain. Amir sat in front of her, his voice steady but filled with concern. "Rania, you need help. Real help. This isn't normal tiredness. I'm taking you to the hospital." Her eyes opened sharply, and she shook her head slightly. "No, not now. I just need to rest." She tried to stand up again, but her legs felt weak. She held onto the side of the bed, trying to steady herself. Amir gently placed his hand on her shoulder, guiding her to sit again. "You're not okay. You can't pretend anymore." At that moment, Rania's last bit of control slipped away. She felt a sharp wave of pain, forcing her to bend forward slightly. She covered her face with her hands. Her breathing was fast, uneven, and painful. Amir reached out to support her immediately, afraid she might faint. Her voice trembled as she spoke, barely louder than a whisper. "Please, just make it quick. I can't take more." Her words weren't dramatic. They weren't meant to shock anyone. They were simply the truth. She couldn't endure another minute of the pain she had been carrying. Amir felt his heart drop when he heard her. Those words were not a request for anything extreme. They were just the exhausted plea of a person who was completely breaking down. She wasn't asking him to stop her pain in a harmful way. She was begging for relief, begging for someone to step in because she couldn't fight anymore. For a moment, he simply looked at her, seeing both her strength and her collapse at the same time. Raina had always been the strong one. Seeing her so vulnerable made him realize how much she had been hiding from everyone. He took a deep breath, placed his hand gently under her arm, and helped her stand. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady. "You don't have to take this alone. Let me help you." She didn't resist. She couldn't. She leaned against him, allowing him to guide her out of the room. Every step was slow and heavy. Amir supported most of her weight, making sure she didn't stumble. He spoke to her softly as he walked, telling her to breathe slowly, telling her that she was safe, telling her that help was close. When they reached the car, he opened the door and helped her sit inside. Her body trembled again as she tried to adjust herself. He placed her seatbelt on, making sure she was comfortable. She looked up at him with tired eyes, eyes that silently thanked him for being there at the moment she needed someone the most. As Amir started the car, Raina leaned her head back against the seat, her breathing still unsteady. He kept glancing at her, checking if she was conscious, reassuring her every few seconds. The night outside was quiet, but the tension inside the car was heavy. For the first time in weeks, Raina allowed herself to depend on someone. She no longer tried to hide her pain or pretend she was strong. She simply let Amir take control, because she had finally reached the point she feared the most, but also the point that saved her life. Amir drove as carefully as he could, yet fast enough to reach help in time. The night roads were almost empty, but every small bump or turn felt like an obstacle. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, not because of the speed but because of fear. Fear of what might happen if he didn't reach the hospital quickly. He kept glancing at Raina, who sat silently beside him. Her head rested against the seat, her eyes half closed. Her breathing was shallow, and her hands were cold, resting weakly in her lap. "Raina, stay with me," he said softly. "We're almost there." She opened her eyes a little, but it was clear she was struggling to stay awake. "I'm trying," she whispered, her voice thin like a fading echo. "I just feel too tired." Amir felt that tightness in his chest again. He wished he could carry the pain for her, or at least take away even a small part of it. But all he could do was keep driving and keep talking to her. He had never seen her this weak. It frightened him in a way he couldn't express. He turned on the car's interior light to see her better. Her face looked pale, almost colorless, and there was a faint trembling in her fingers. He reached for her hand for a moment, giving it a gentle squeeze. She squeezed back lightly, a tiny response, but it told him she was still conscious. "Just hold on," he whispered again. "I won't let anything happen to you." Raina tried to manage a small smile, but even that seemed like it took effort. She leaned her head slightly toward him, as if his voice was the only thing she could follow. "I know," she said quietly. "I trust you." Those words went straight to his heart. He had always cared for her more than he had ever admitted to himself. He admired her strength, her kindness, the way she always looked out for everyone, while ignoring her own needs. But tonight, she wasn't strong. Tonight, she was vulnerable, and that made him even more determined to help her. As he drove, he dialed the hospital using hands-free calling. His voice was calm, but the urgency inside it was clear. He explained Rania's symptoms, her pain, her weakness, her difficulty breathing. The nurse on the line understood the seriousness immediately and told him to bring her straight to the emergency entrance. They promised to have staff ready. "Thank you," Amir said before ending the call. He glanced again at Rania. "They're waiting for you. Just a few more minutes." Rania tried to nod, but her head barely moved. She closed her eyes again, breathing slowly as she fought the dizziness. She felt like her body was floating away from her, like she was losing control of everything, but she could still hear Amir's voice, steady, comforting, and close. It kept her from drifting too far. A few minutes later, Amir turned into the hospital driveway. The bright lights above the entrance glowed against the dark night, and he felt a slight relief wash over him. He parked as close as possible and rushed to her side. When he opened the door, the cool night air touched her face, making her shiver. "Rania, we're here," he said gently. She blinked slowly, trying to gather the little strength she had left. Amir unbuckled her seatbelt and placed his arm around her shoulders. "Can you stand?" She nodded faintly, though it was clear she wasn't sure. Amir supported her completely, letting her lean on him. Her legs felt wobbly, as if they might give out at any moment. Every small step was like walking through heavy wind, but Amir guided her carefully. The glass doors of the emergency entrance opened automatically when they approached. A couple of nurses saw them from across the hall and hurried toward them. "Is she the one who called in?" one nurse asked. "Yes," Amir replied immediately. "She's in a lot of pain, and she's barely able to walk." The nurses brought a wheelchair and helped Rania sit down gently. As soon as she sat, her body relaxed a little, but her eyes closed again for a brief second. Amir felt a wave of panic. "She's fine," one nurse assured him softly. "She's just exhausted. We'll take her inside now. You come along too." Amir followed closely as they pushed her toward a room. Rania held his hand loosely the entire way, as if he was her connection to the world around her. When they reached the examination room, the nurses helped her onto the bed. She lay down slowly, her body sinking into the sheets like she had been waiting for this moment. A doctor entered shortly after. He checked her pulse, asked her questions, and listened carefully to Amir's explanations. Rania answered softly whenever she could, but most of the time, she simply looked at Amir, relying on his voice to help her focus. The doctor noticed how anxious she looked and spoke softly to her. "We're going to take care of you. You're safe here. But you need to relax your breathing." Rania tried, but every breath felt heavy. She kept clutching Amir's hand, grounding herself through the warmth of his touch. Amir moved closer to her side. "I'm right here," he said. "You're not alone." Her breathing steadied slightly. The doctor ordered tests and instructed the nurses to start an IV drip to stabilize her. As they worked around her, Rania watched the ceiling, feeling faint but a little more secure now. The hospital atmosphere was unfamiliar, but the presence of Amir made everything feel less frightening. While the medical staff prepared equipment, Amir sat beside her, watching every small movement she made. Sometimes she closed her eyes for a moment, and he would say her name gently to bring her back. Other times she looked at him silently, with tiredness filling her gaze. "How are you feeling now?" he asked softly. She took a slow breath. "Still hurting, but I feel safe." That single word, safe, meant more to him than she knew. He brushed a few strands of hair away from her forehead so they wouldn't bother her. "You're going to be okay. They'll help you. You'll start feeling better soon." Rania felt herself relax a little more. She wanted to say something, maybe thank him or tell him how scared she had been, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat felt tight, and her chest still ached, so she simply looked at him with a tired softness that said everything she couldn't express. A nurse came in and began attaching the IV. Rania winced slightly, and Amir immediately leaned closer. "It's okay," he whispered. "It'll help you feel better." She nodded slowly, trusting his reassurance more than anything else. After a while, the doctor returned with the initial reports. He explained that her condition was serious but manageable if treated quickly. Amir listened carefully, asking questions whenever needed. Rania, meanwhile, lay quietly, letting the doctor's words sink in. When the doctor left the room, Amir looked at her again. "Rania, why didn't you tell me earlier? Or anyone?" She looked away for a moment, her eyes glistening slightly. "I didn't want to trouble anyone," she said softly. "I thought I could handle it myself." Amir shook his head gently. "You don't have to handle everything alone. You have people who care about you. And I'm one of them." She finally met his eyes again. Despite her weakness, a small, emotional expression passed across her face. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." "There's nothing to be sorry for," he said. "You're here now. That's what matters." There was a quiet moment between them, filled only with the soft beeping of the monitor. Rania's breathing had become a little steadier now, though she still felt the weight of exhaustion pulling her down. Amir stayed beside her, not moving even an inch. He felt responsible, not in a burdened way, but in a deeply caring way. He couldn't imagine leaving her side. Not when she was so fragile. He watched her breathe, watched her fight through the pain, and admired her strength even in her weakness. As the minutes passed, Rania drifted in and out of light sleep. Every time she opened her eyes, Amir was there, sitting close, watching over her. She felt comfort in that. She felt supported. She felt like she didn't have to pretend anymore. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. And for the first time in his life, Amir realized what it truly meant to care for someone so deeply that their pain felt like your own. The hours that followed were some of the longest and heaviest Amir had ever lived through. After Rania was taken into the emergency treatment area, he was asked to wait outside. At first, he stood near the door, refusing to take even a single step away. But when a nurse gently reminded him that they needed space to work, he moved to the waiting area, a bright but cold space filled with chairs that felt too hard and lights that felt too bright. He sat down, but sitting did nothing to calm him. He kept tapping his foot, rubbing his hands together, and staring at the door that separated him from Rania. His mind replayed her words again and again, "I can't take more." Those words haunted him, even though he knew she didn't mean them in a dangerous way. She was simply overwhelmed, worn down, pushed past her limits. She didn't want anything harmful. She just wanted relief, a pause, someone to lift the weight that had been crushing her. Amir wanted to be that person for her. And right now, all he could do was wait. Doctors and nurses walked past him quickly, their shoes clicking against the clean floor. Every time a door opened, he sat up straight, hoping to hear something about Rania, but each time, it was someone else's family receiving news. Finally, a nurse approached him with a clipboard. "You're with the young woman who came in earlier, right?" "Yes," Amir said immediately, standing up. "How is she? Is she awake? Is she talking?" The nurse spoke calmly, her voice kind. "She's being examined and treated. The doctors suspect she has a serious internal infection. They're running more tests. But she's stable right now." Amir felt relief, but it was a fragile relief, like a small candle burning in a large dark room. "Is she conscious?" "She drifts in and out," the nurse replied. "She's very weak, but she's responding. The doctor will update you soon." "Can I see her?" he asked. "Not yet. Let them finish the tests. We'll call you once she's settled." When the nurse walked away, Amir sat back down, but his body refused to relax. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped tightly. He felt helpless. He wasn't used to sitting still while someone he cared about was suffering. He wanted to do something, anything, to help, but this time, her life was in the hands of doctors. His thoughts drifted to the past few weeks. He remembered moments when he had casually asked her if she was okay, and she had always smiled and said she was fine. He remembered the way she pretended to be energetic even when her eyes looked tired. He remembered how she pushed herself, never wanting to inconvenience anyone, and he remembered how he believed her, thinking she just needed rest. He felt guilty, even though he knew it wasn't his fault. Still, he wished he had insisted earlier. He wished he had read the signs more clearly. He looked up at the ceiling, taking a deep breath. "Just let her be okay," he whispered to himself. Minutes turned into hours. The clock on the wall moved painfully slowly. Sometimes Amir walked around the waiting room just to stop himself from panicking. Other times, he sat still, staring at his phone even though there were no messages. At one point, he saw a nurse carrying a tray of test samples. He stood up immediately. "Excuse me, Rania. Is she okay?" The nurse nodded politely. "She's being monitored closely. Please wait. The doctor will come to speak with you." It wasn't the full answer he wanted, but it was enough to keep his hope alive. Just after midnight, the door finally opened, and a doctor stepped out. Looking around the room, "Family of Rania?" he called. Amir stood up at once. "I'm here." The doctor walked toward him. His expression wasn't grim, but it wasn't relaxed either. "We've run several tests," he began. "Rania has a severe internal infection that spread more quickly than expected. That's why her condition worsened so fast." Amir nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "She's very weak," the doctor continued. "But she's responding to the treatment we've started. The next few hours are important. We'll continue monitoring her." Amir felt his heart drop and lift at the same time. "So, she's going to be okay?" "She came at the right time," the doctor said. "A little later, and it could have become much more dangerous. But you brought her in quickly. That made a difference." Amir exhaled deeply, shakily, as if he had been holding his breath for hours. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." "You can see her now," the doctor added. "She's conscious, but very tired. Don't talk too much. Just be there." Amir followed the doctor through the quiet hallway. Every step felt heavy with anticipation. When they reached her room, the doctor opened the door gently. There she was. Rania lay on the bed, connected to an IV line. Her face still looked pale, but she seemed calmer. Her breathing was steady now, not rushed and painful like before. Her eyes were closed, but when she heard the door open, she slowly turned her head. When she saw Amir, her eyes softened, and a small, weak smile appeared on her lips. He stepped closer, trying to keep his emotions controlled. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey," she replied quietly, her voice fragile but warm. He sat beside her, being careful not to disturb anything. "How do you feel?" "Tired," she whispered. "But better than before." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression gentle and full of unspoken feelings. "You didn't leave," she said softly. "Of course I didn't," Amir replied. "I'm not going anywhere." Rania blinked slowly, her eyes glistening. "I was really scared," she admitted. "I thought I would break." "You didn't," he said, leaning closer. "You held on. You were stronger than the pain." She looked away for a moment, her eyes tracing the pattern of the sheets. "When I said I couldn't take more, I wasn't thinking clearly. I just felt so overwhelmed." "I know," he replied gently. "You just needed someone. I'm glad I was there." She closed her eyes briefly, soaking in the calmness around her. "I thought I could handle everything on my own. But my body didn't listen anymore." "You don't have to handle everything alone," he said softly. "Not anymore." There was a peaceful silence between them. The soft hum of hospital machines filled the room, blending with the quiet beats of their shared moment. A nurse entered, checking the IV line. "She'll need rest," the nurse said to Amir. "You can stay, but she shouldn't talk too much." Amir nodded. "I'll stay quietly." When the nurse left, he turned back to Rania. "Try to sleep," he whispered. "I'm right here." Rania nodded gently. Her eyes closed slowly, like a heavy curtain falling over a tired stage. Amir watched her chest rise and fall, watched the tension leave her face bit by bit. Seeing her resting safely brought a sense of relief that he hadn't felt all night. He leaned back in the chair, but his eyes stayed on her. He wanted to be there when she woke up. He wanted to make sure she never felt that kind of fear again. Even though his body was tired, his heart stayed awake. As the hours passed, Rania slept peacefully. Sometimes she moved lightly, sometimes she whispered something softly in her sleep, but she never looked uncomfortable. And each time she stirred, Amir whispered her name gently, letting her know she wasn't alone. At dawn, the first soft light entered the room through the small window. Amir glanced outside, realizing he hadn't slept at all. But he didn't feel tired. He felt grateful. Grateful that she was safe. Grateful that he reached her on time. Grateful that she trusted him. And as he watched her slowly begin to wake up with the morning light touching her face, he knew one thing clearly: this night had changed everything. When Rania slowly opened her eyes the next morning, the first thing she saw was the warm sunlight resting gently on the wall beside her. The hospital room looked softer in the daylight, less scary, less cold. She blinked a few times before her eyes focused completely. And then she noticed something else. Something that made her heart feel lighter. Amir was still there. He sat in the same chair beside her bed, leaning slightly forward, his arms resting on the edge of the bed. He looked tired, eyes red from staying awake all night, hair slightly messy, but there was a calmness on his face. He hadn't slept a minute, yet he looked peaceful, as if the only thing that mattered was that she was safe. Rania watched him for a moment before she spoke. "You didn't go home?" Amir lifted his head, and when he saw her awake, relief washed over his face. "Good morning," he said softly. "How are you feeling now?" She took a slow breath. "Better. Much better." "That's good," he said, sitting up straighter. "I didn't want to leave until I knew you were okay." A small smile touched her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he replied gently. "Anyone who cares about you would have done the same." But she knew that wasn't completely true. Not everyone stays all night. Not everyone rushes across the city. Not everyone holds your hand through fear. Amir had done all of that without thinking twice, and it touched her deeply. A nurse entered the room with a warm smile. "Good to see you awake," she said to Rania. "How do you feel?" "Etched. Weak, but much better," Rania replied honestly. "That's normal," the nurse said. "Your body has been fighting a strong infection. You'll need rest, medicine, and time." Rania nodded. The nurse checked her IV line, adjusted her pillows, and noted down her progress on a chart. "You're lucky," she added kindly. "Coming here at the right time made a big difference. You're recovering well." Amir listened silently, and a softness filled his eyes. Knowing she was getting better felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. After the nurse left, Rania turned toward Amir. "I can't believe how bad things got," she said quietly. "I didn't expect it to be this serious." Amir looked at her carefully. "You pushed through too much pain for too long. You didn't give your body the rest it needed." She blinked slowly, realizing how true that was. She had ignored signs: tiredness, weakness, discomfort, believing she could handle everything alone. But the truth was, she couldn't. No one could. "I didn't want to trouble anyone," she said softly. "I didn't want to bother you, or anyone else with my problems." Amir shook his head. "You're not a burden, Rania. Not to me. Not to anyone who truly cares about you." She looked down, her fingers lightly gripping the bedsheet. "I know, but I didn't want to look weak." He leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle and genuine. "Asking for help isn't weakness. Hiding pain is what hurts you more." Rania looked up slowly, meeting his eyes. There was no judgment there, only care, sincerity, and warmth. A silence settled between them, but it was a comforting silence. The kind that doesn't need words to be understood. A little later, a doctor entered with her medical file. He greeted her and began explaining her condition more clearly. "Your infection had spread quickly," he said. "If you had waited longer, it could have become much more complicated. But you came at the right time. That's what saved you." He glanced toward Amir and added, "He insisted on bringing you here immediately. That helped more than you know." Rania looked at Amir with a soft, grateful expression. She wanted to say something, but the doctor continued. "We'll keep you for 2 more days," he said. "Your body needs rest, fluids, and antibiotics. After that, You can go home, but you must take care of yourself. No stress, no overworking, and plenty of rest." She nodded. "I understand." Amir also nodded, almost as if he was silently promising the doctor that he would personally make sure she followed the instructions. After the doctor left, Rania spoke again. "I don't remember everything from last night, but I remember feeling like I was fading, like I couldn't hold on anymore." Amir listened quietly. "I said something. I said I couldn't take more," she continued slowly. "I didn't mean anything harmful. I was just overwhelmed." "I know," Amir replied softly. "You were in pain. Anyone would have felt that way." She took another breath. "But I felt safe when you were next to me. I felt like I could let go of the weight I was carrying." Amir's expression softened. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Rania's eyes glistened with emotion. She had always been strong, independent, and quiet about her struggles. But today, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: comfort. Real comfort. The kind that comes from knowing someone truly cares. As the day passed, Amir stayed with her. He helped her sit up when she needed to. He offered her water and adjusted her blanket. He talked to her in a soft voice, telling light stories to distract her from the heaviness of her situation. Sometimes she laughed quietly, sometimes she simply listened. But through it all, she felt supported. In the afternoon, she looked at him and said, "Why did you stay the whole night? You could have gone home to rest." He smiled gently. "How could I leave when you needed someone?" She held his gaze for a moment longer. "I don't think I would have made it through the night without you," she said honestly. Amir looked down for a moment, almost shyly. "I didn't do anything big," he said. "I just stayed. That's the biggest thing anyone has done for me in a long time," she whispered. He didn't respond with words, but the softness in his eyes said more than words could. Later that evening, Rania's mother arrived at the hospital after being informed. She was worried but relieved when she saw her daughter safe and improving. She thanked Amir many times, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You brought her here on time," she said. "You helped her when she needed it the most. Thank you for taking care of my daughter." Amir shook his head politely. "She needed someone. I'm glad I was nearby." When Rania was alone again with him, she said softly, "I didn't know how much people cared about me. I kept everything inside." Amir smiled gently. "You don't have to do that anymore. You're not alone. Not now. Not ever." Rania felt something warm settle in her chest. Not the pain from before, something softer, something comforting. That night, she slept peacefully, not because she was in a hospital bed, not because of the medicine, but because for the first time in weeks, her heart felt light. Amir stayed until she fell asleep. He watched her breathing steadily, her face calm and relaxed. Before leaving for the night, he whispered softly, "Rest now. You're strong. You made it through the hardest part." He stepped out of the room quietly, but his heart stayed behind with her. 2 days later, Rania was discharged. Amir came to take her home. He walked beside her slowly, making sure she didn't feel weak or unsteady. She held his arm lightly as they walked out of the hospital. Outside, the air felt fresher. The sky looked clearer, and life felt different, softer, calmer. As they reached the car, Rania looked up at him and said quietly, "You saved my life." Amir shook his head gently. "You saved yourself. I just helped." She smiled a real, peaceful smile. "Thank you," she whispered again. He smiled too, always. And as they drove away from the hospital, it wasn't just the infection that had been healed. Something deeper had changed. Rania no longer felt alone in the world. And Amir realized that sometimes, saving someone doesn't come from doing something heroic. It comes from simply staying, holding their hand, and refusing to let them face their pain alone.